serious, what was a normal part of your life growing up that other people were shocked by? Whenever my friends would come over, I would tell them about the rules you had to follow when talking to my dad. This would include, agree with everything he says, don't speak unless asked a question, always try and answer, don't say I don't know, don't cry when he has a go at you, etc. Took a few friends meeting my dad then refusing to come round again, being picked up early because they were upset, to realize that most kids don't live in constant fear of a parent and don't have a set rules in order to keep said parent calm and happy. This is fairly mild. My dad extensively renovated our house. He made every bench top, door frame, window, shelf, desk, sink, shower, cupboard, or drawer at a comfortable height for us. Our ceilings were 9 feet. My family is well over 6 feet, with my dad topping out at 6 feet 6. When people first came to my house they were shocked by the height of everything. We had little stools in the bathroom for short guests. We even had to get step stools in the children's room because a normal height friends had issues getting on the couch when my siblings and I were younger. My house was the stuff of legend on the yard. We even had a giant dog which to us was normal sized. I have never been as comfortable in a house as I was in my childhood home. Kneeling on rice as a punishment for just about anything. Mom would throw a few handfuls of rice in a corner, and you had to kneel on it for 20 minutes to an hour, hands behind your back, and don't you dare try to lean on that wall, or you'd get smacked in the back of the head, and into the wall and your time would start over. Afterwards you'd have to clean it up including any blood from broken skin, and then often you'd have to help make dinner, or do whatever chore as if nothing happened. One time I made a new friend from middle school, and invited him over. We just had a normal evening of pizza and video games, and watching shitty early internet flash movies. My parents would check up on us, but just let us be, and watched TV in the living room by themselves quietly. As the evening went on, he got kinda weird and withdrawn, and then took me aside to ask if me and my family were a bunch of fucking Bible thumpers, to which I incredulously replied no to. He basically explained that the lack of skin flicks lying around, loud arguments, strange people coming over, and holes punched in the walls was extremely off-putting to him. To him, that sort of constant instability and chaos was completely normal and something that regular average people did, and my quiet boring home life was a total outlier. It was kinda hard for us to be friends after that, and we drifted apart really fast. I hope he's doing alright. The total lack of love. My brother and sister have always had a good relationship with my parents, but for reasons I don't understand my parents wished I didn't exist. I was an inconvenience at best. I once broke my ribs falling out of a tree. They made me wait 3 days until they had spare time to take me to hospital. Beatings were frequent. Beatings for any perceived mistake. Beatings for being bullied at school. The beatings I was told were to toughen me up. Beatings for crying while being beaten. I eventually figured out that the beatings, name calling and abuse all came from the same root cause, using up my parents' time and effort when they could have been spending it with my siblings or each other. So I tried to become invisible. I learned to move around the house silently, which floorboards squeaked, how to open and close doors without sound, how to control my breathing to be absolutely quiet. I set up a chair and books in my closet so I could be in there unseen for hours. It was only when I left home that I found out other children enjoyed spending time with their parents, that they talked to them, had fun with them, and were supported and cared for by them. I can't imagine how good that must feel. Even to have memories of cuddling on a sofa with a parent, or going to the park must be amazing. Child neglect. My house was filthy, and I mean really filthy. Black mold covering the 2 different corners of a finished basement, trash all over the floors, never clean clothes, because the washer and dryer were broken, dinner once or twice a week with no food in the house. Whenever I'd go over a friend's house I'd notice, wow, it's so clean in here. Everything smells so nice. Look at all those snacks in the cupboard. That was my mother's house. Thank God she lost custody and I'm now with my outstanding dad. As an Asian kid I grew up being disciplined physically. Got the belt, the hand, the slipper, wooden spoon, you name it. This had happened to me so much as a kid I literally thought this was normal and that all families did this. I remember being in 8th grade and having a conversation with my friends, and we were talking about our parents, and I nonchalantly was like, oh yeah, my mom hits me all the time. She always slaps me in the face. I'm used to it, because I genuinely and truly thought this was normal. I didn't realize how fucked up it was until my teacher brought me into the hallway to ask if my home life was okay and explained to me his duty to report thing. He asked if I wanted him to call. Obviously I said no, but I remember going forward this teacher used to walk on eggshells when it came to giving me bad comments or speaking with my parents during parent-teacher interviews because he didn't want me to get in trouble. I grew up in this rickety old farmhouse in the middle of Minnesota. It was really cold a lot of the year, and our upstairs didn't have insulation, so we didn't have any heat upstairs. We'd sleep with an electric blanket and loads of other blankets heaped on top. When I woke up in the mornings, there would sometimes be frost on my walls because it was so cold and the windows didn't keep the cold out very well. It would also sometimes get to -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then school would automatically be cancelled because kids couldn't wait outside at the bus stop. And sometimes mom would take us outside to blow bubbles on really cold days. The bubbles would freeze in midair and fall to the ground and shatter. My friend/boyfriend were all shocked by this stuff. Doesn't get anywhere near as cold where we live now. The amount of trips to the liquor store. When I was young, nearly every time I got in the car with my mom or dad, the story was the same. We are going to stop at the liquor store, then home. Sometimes when I'd switch parents, they are divorced, I'd stop at the liquor store twice, once each way. One day I was at a sleepover at a friend's house whose parents weren't extreme alcoholics. We ran errands on 3 or 4 separate times and didn't stop at the liquor store. 8-year-old me was so confused. On the final trip I poked my head up between the front seats and, trying to be helpful and remind them, said, "Aren't we going to stop at the liquor store?" And the parents looked at me like I had 2 heads. No. I was so confused I just got out of the van and went inside. I never took a vacation or seasonal trip with family as a kid. We just never had the money for it. When I tell people this, they're appalled that I've never been to Disneyland, beautiful islands or foreign countries in my youthful summers. Guess a lot of people I know can't fathom the idea that some families are poor. That, and I've moved around a lot. Went to like 4 or 5 elementary schools and 3 middle schools. Just trying to find the next cheapest place to live. I didn't know I was in a very religious family until I found out how abnormal it was in college. Like my family and I never missed Sunday Mass. We used to celebrate every first Friday of the month by dressing up nicely to go to a Latin Mass, which was like the original language said in the first Catholic Masses. We prayed the rosary a lot, and during the Lenten season we would go around churches to offer more rosaries and prayers. Plus our family has like 4 priests and 5 nuns. Now that I'm older though, a lot of the stuff we used to do happens less often. Although I still haven't missed Sunday Mass. When I was a kid I lived on a traveler site, that is a caravan park for gypsy and or Irish travelers, but I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to be normal. The teachers put me into the special class automatically with all the slow or deaf kids. I think people didn't expect me to be intelligent or enjoy reading and drawing. I'm a professional now, and people are shocked I came from that background. Someone said I looked like a picky the other day, lol. My parents never took my siblings and I to the doctor or dentist unless bone was showing or you were on death's door. I always assumed it was because we couldn't afford it, but it wasn't until I was much older and in therapy I realized it was actually because my parents were controlling. Both of them worked in the medical field, but they weren't doctors, so they thought they knew better than everyone else. If we did get sick, I had chronic sinus infections as a child because I had terrible allergies, none of which they addressed. My dad would call his colleague's wife, who was a doctor, explain my symptoms, and she would prescribe antibiotics. My dad also forged my annual immunization forms for high school 1 year because he didn't want to take me. The dentist he used to take us to was his friend and would give him a discount, but I'd have to endure this man's sexist bullshit if I wanted my teeth cleaned. The last time I ever went to him, he told me as he's giving me a filling I should really get a nose job, I'd be so much prettier. My dad scolded me in the car after, thinking I had brought it up. It wasn't until I went to the doctor engine for the first time in college. I had no fucking valuable piece of my medical history other than accidents I had as a kid. It was like I was starting new at age 20. I now go regularly to the doctor. Getting beaten for dying or going the wrong way in video games. My biological father was abusive and bipolar as hell. I would even get beat if I didn't play Super Mario 64 correctly. It made me aggressively competitive in video games, and people don't always understand why I don't like being wrong about anything. It's not that I always think I'm right, but I had to make sure I didn't leave any loopholes in conversational things that I was assigned to do, or there goes another punch, kick, or throw. So when people hung around me growing up, it wasn't seen as normal to be so meticulous and accurate about everything I do. I don't have OCD, I just don't like fucking anything up, if I can help it. Fuck that asshole. I used to think I had good times with him at times, but I wonder if that's just because I was afraid to fuck up around him, so I did nothing as a result. I low-key grew up in a cult. It wasn't ridiculously intense. No terrible brainwashing or abuse. But the seclusion made for a bizarre childhood. I went to an elementary school in the basement of our church. At the largest, there were 15 students. The smallest I remember it being was 5. We were there for the week in school, then back again on the Sabbath, Saturday, for service. I didn't have any friends outside of the church, and inside the church it was only my classmates that were even close. It made for a real shit 8th grade when my school shut down and I was moved to public school. For the last year of middle school, the church had a lot of weird rules about things. They believed that the Sabbath started late on Friday and went until midnight Saturday, and therefore we couldn't go to school or work on Friday. I thought Friday was part of the weekend until I was 9. They followed a flexitarian diet, fish and poultry as the only animals we could eat. Anything with a cloven hoof or crawled along the ocean floor was dirty and forbidden. To this day I haven't eaten any red meat. I never really developed a taste for it, and it's fun to pull out. Never ever have I ever eaten bacon at parties. No dancing, no singing, no fun. I didn't have any knowledge of pop culture or even music that wasn't choir or piano. You wouldn't really know it to meet me now. I'm fairly well adjusted, decently functional human considering the isolated mess I started as, which is nice. Death and illness. My dad died from multiple organ failure, liver and kidneys gave in due to alcohol. This was a couple of years ago. My grandma was also sick around the same time with a cancerous brain tumor. She died last year. At the same time as my dad and grandma, my granddad was having heart issues and his dementia was getting worse. He then died earlier this year. When I got a concussion as a kid, my parents took me home and got the church elders round to pray over my sick bed rather than take me to hospital. I used to tell it as a funny story. Haha, it was like these big grey ghosts around my bed because I was only half conscious and delirious. Until one of my friends looked at me and was like, you know that's child abuse and you could have died, right? Apostrophe. Poverty. I grew up in a gross place. My single father was a drunk and left the apartment a mess. The couch was covered in rips with stuffing coming out. Stains all over the floors. Flies. Crap everywhere. My best friend of almost 30 years was telling me a while back that when he first came over he was amazed at how poor we were as he thought he was the poorest kid in town. I explained that a lot of it had to do with my dad just leaving it in a bad state and being too drunk to clean or to teach me or my brother to clean. But his mom did work and she kept their apartment clean. We had a good laugh on that. Luckily, my wife is clean, as were past girlfriends. These wonderful women taught me, along the way, how to maintain a clean home, to wash the shower once a week, to change sheets. I'm not a rich man, but I 100% feel live comfortably, in the literal sense. It's nice to come home to a clean one. My parents were always open and supportive when it comes to my underage drinking. A lot of my friends were kinda shocked by it as they kept lying to their parents about where they went and what they were doing, swearing how they barely touched a drink when in fact they had spent the whole night vomiting. Meanwhile I always told mine at which pub and with whom I would be or how many beers I had. Also I have never had the forbidden fruit feeling about alcohol, so I was never into binge drinking. As a kid, I lived in Huntington Beach, circa. To my family and some of my friends, surfing was life. I went down to the beach to catch a few waves before school at 5 o'clock in the morning and went straight after school, and my friends usually came with me. A lot of times, other kids wanted me to come over to their house or spend the night, but I had to refuse often because my friends who did surf with me had usually already made arrangements. When I told the others why I couldn't join them, they didn't exactly understand why I would go freeze my ass off at 5 AM just to get smashed by a wall of water over and over again. I was mostly raised by my dad and grandmother. I was constantly talked down to, criticized for just about anything I did or said, was yelled at for showing too much emotion, called names, and gaslighted regularly. When I was about 5, my mother basically kidnapped me from my dad for about a year and a half. In that time I was starved and beaten. I knew what my mother did wasn't normal, but it took me far too long to realize that most kids didn't get criticized throughout every single day. I ended up being anorexic because my grandmother would constantly go on about how I was eating too much or not enough, or how I didn't have to worry because she would be there to tell me if I'd gotten fat. I also ended up with OCD because she went above and beyond to make me feel like nothing I could ever do was good enough and that every I did or said was wrong. Been out of contact with my relatives for almost 5 years now. I always thought that those Christmas scenes of families playing games, having fun and going out for a post-dinner walk was made up. Surely no family actually does that, or is that happy at Christmas? Apparently, having lots of family arguments, awkwardly sitting around in silence, being told you look really fat, and just generally saying horrible things to each other is not the norm at Christmas. When my friends told me how much they love Christmas and playing all these fun games in which all family members happily participate in, I was so confused.